Very few countries in the world have high ownership, right?
Some people are really going to get pinched out of owning.
It's a forced savings account.
And the ones who are wealthy bought property. The ones who didn't did not buy property. That's the only difference.
Do you think home ownership as a whole in Canada continues to drop?
No, I don't think so. I think that people will find a way. I think people will find a way because people want to own their own homes, and they're pushed by their parents because they think that it's the best investment they can get, and they're not wrong. And for their generation, and maybe that won't change for our generations either. I think that some people will struggle to own and therefore will be forced to rent, who maybe don't want to be. But I don't know if there'll be a significant change to where it is now.
I do.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I think we're heading that way. Very few countries in the world have high ownership, right? North America, that's kind of a North American idea. And I rent my house, right? Because I know I'm going to move in the next couple of years, and I want to move a bunch of times. It would be, in my opinion, it makes no sense to put equity in a home, have it sit there dead, pay the fees to buy and sell, try to time the market perfectly, and then when you could just do it the other way. I rent a brand new home. It's very nice. I have no worries. There's not all of a sudden something going to cost me thousands of dollars. And I have owned my house before, and we did all the stuff ourselves and renovated it. Yeah. But you look at sounding old, but you look at the people coming up now that they don't want that. Like the amount of calls we get from tenants that they can't change a battery in a thermostat or can't change, they don't. Can you imagine owning a house and having the maintenance? I don't think that's desired as much. I don't think people stay in the same spot forever like they used to. So if I'm planning to move in a couple of years, I'm not going to buy a house. I'm going to rent it, right? I think it gets, as affordability becomes obviously a thing, it gets increasingly harder. And look at the stats of personal debt. I did a video, it'll come out in the next day or two, but there's a company now that will give you a loan to pay your first and last month's rent in Ontario because it's so expensive. So people, and that's a huge amount of people can't afford that. How are you going to afford a down payment on a house? And now the government's getting involved in offering all these savings accounts, but that just puts more pressure on the price.
Yes.
But I think the dream of that is it's good to own a house, but I think less and less people maybe.
Yeah. So why do you think it's more common in North America than other places to own a home?
Well, I think just the actual availability of land. You look at the population of Canada, and we're one of the biggest countries in the world, and then you look at the population of England, that's tiny.
Yeah.
And realistically, if they want to build all these 15-minute cities and the stuff they do, they're not building single-family homes. Like you have to build. Even now, you imagine building. Well, Vancouver could absorb 100,000 units today if they could be built, but there's no land. Now, if they're not going to build 100,000 single-family, even if they could, they're not going to build 100,000 single-family homes. They're going to build 100,000 unit tower, whatever they can do, and it just gets that way. We're urbanizing, so more and more people, are coming to the cities. So yeah, I think it tapers off. I think we are at the lower than we were in the past, and I think it continues to trend that way. And I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I think people want different things out of a house.
Yeah.
And I also don't. I assume that there's a lot of. You look at some of the big, huge funds that are buying up single-family houses. That it's hard they're looking at that as an asset completely different than someone looking at it as a home. So for them to go in and buy 1,000 houses in a city, they can dictate the price and rent them out, and that's different than someone struggling to buy their first home, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think a lot of people will get burnt now in the next couple of years, where you locked in at 1.8, now you try to refinance that at 6. That hurts, and that's something. Even if rents go up a little bit, but you don't have that fluctuation. So I think there's lots of things like that. I think we trend to be more of a renter nation. The people that immigrate here, generally they can't just automatically get approved to buy a house, and that's where our population growth is coming from.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about owning your own home, but maybe it's just my own personal perspective or preference. I think that not always, but eventually people want to own their own home. But again, that just may be more the culture and the experience of what I've had. I know I've enjoyed it, and I like there's something about the control of having your own house. But that being, at the same time, I was on variable, and my monthly cost went up $1,000. My property hasn't changed anything, and so there's so I'm already experienced that before the cliff comes where the rest are going to. Luckily, I can afford the difference, but yeah, I think that some people are really going to get pinched out of owning because of the costs and everything.
I'm not against home ownership. I think, but here's what also changed my mindset on this. How you say you like the control of owning it, but try not making a mortgage payment and see if you own that house, or don't pay your property tax. And that, I think people don't realize that the bank owns 95% or whatever amount you put down. And the second you can't make that payment, it's really no different than getting evicted. You're losing that house. The city owns it if you don't pay the taxes. So you don't really own the land. If you don't pay if you don't pay your water, they cut it off. You don't have access to your house. So there's all these things that are very similar. Where I think it's a good option, and this is why I think it's been a good option for so many people, is it's a forced savings account.
Yes.
So most people cannot save money, and this is a fallback. And I also feel like this is where we're going to see the biggest impact on the economy, is that we haven't seen yet from interest rates. Is forever people used it almost like an ATM. You get to refinance, the bank offers you, hey, you pull $100,000 out, just throw it on the mortgage, and you spend that money in the economy. Mm-hmm. It might go the other way, where your mortgage comes up and they say, look, you're not meeting your debt cover. You actually have to put money in, or you're back at zero and you're re-amortizing it longer. And now all that money is not getting spent in the economy. So I think that we'll feel that. And you're seeing, like I read an article there, if you get I don't know what it's actually called, but like a fixed variable rate. So if you have a variable rate but your payment's fixed, have you ever seen those loans? And what the bank does is pushes the mortgage out. They're actually getting, they pushed them out to 98 years, right? And some people,
98.
well, because the payment can never change. But when that comes up, you're now paying over 100% interest. So you're paying, because you're not even meeting your minimum payment. So then what's the point? So I think things like that we will eventually see a little bit of trickle down. But I think for the majority of people, it forces you to put money into an illiquid asset.
Yeah.
And that's great as long as the asset goes up in value. But if
it's true. Like it's a forced savings, it's a forced direction, which some people need because sometimes making a decision is hard, right? I think the root word of decision is to kill, and we don't want to kill all our options, so we just float along and just take whatever comes along to us. Whereas with this, it's very hard to transact. You don't want to move. You don't want to give up your friends, your neighbors. So people just fall down that path, and all of a sudden they wake up and 30 years later, like, oh, I'm still here. Well, at least I have $1 million equity now, so that's a nice bonus, right? And so I come from a long line of immigrant family, and so my dad immigrated here, and his family did, etc. And the ones who are wealthy bought property. The ones who did not buy property. That's the only difference between them. All right. And there were some of them done extremely well just because they made one decision to buy property. Now, is that going to continue on? Potentially. And we can talk about that. And I think that there's incentives to keep that going. That is structurally reinforced in our system. They try and push that as much as they can to keep the system afloat. And so there are massive incentives and structures in the favor of owning real estate. But can that continue on forever? I don't know. But they probably didn't think that house prices would go to over $1 million 30 years ago. Is that going to go to 2, 3, 4 million? I don't know. But there's structures in place to try to get there. So.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that stems from, the banks need people to have mortgages, right? They have to lend money out like that. So that's where I think the whole American dream was set up. Was it's
Yeah.
bought by the banks. It's a great way to sell a very expensive product to every single person,
Yes.
and tell them they want it, and the bank really controls that asset 100%
Yes.
until no one's paying their house up.
And it's no different than renting though, because the bank still owns it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but I think you have a little more control in that, what you do with the asset, not having to deal with the landlord, make your own personal touches, you know. And is it the best financial decision always? Probably not. There's probably better opportunities, but for most people, it seems to have been the best option, because most people, that's where their wealth is tied up in.